In this follow-up video, I wanted to talk a little bit about the features that this Autosplitter has. Okay. So in Edit Splits here, again, we bring up this menu, and under Settings, we bring up this menu. Right? So again, any percent, nemesis percent, any percent, knife only. Pretty self-explanatory here what these are. These are just, you check the box for which category you want to run. Any percent, it skips. It doesn't split on reloading doors, so like the basement and the system disk room in the Dead Factory, it doesn't reload, or it doesn't split on those doors. It also doesn't split all the way from the train crash through leaving the chapel after picking up the key in Clock Tower, and it also doesn't split from... It'll split when you enter the 4th floor of the hospital, and then it'll split when you enter the save room of the hospital on the way out. So it skips all of those. Right? And Nemesis percent will do the same thing. It doesn't split in the exact same places. Any percent knife only, it does the exact same things, except it does split at every door in the Clock Tower because early late powders don't matter for knife only. Now let's say some of these missing splits here, you do want to split on these doors. Right? So you can click door split alterations here. And here, the first option, that basement reload and the system disk room reload, if you want to split on the doors going out and back in, just click this. It'll add, you have to add 4 more splits to the set that I have included, but if you add those in, you can split on them. Include doors for major RNG segments. So this is the Clock Tower early late powder segment, and basically all of the hospital for Carlos. If you want to include those splits, just check this, and it will include all 16 of those missing doors. The 6 from the Clock Tower, the 10 from the hospital. Right? Let's say you're not doing knife only, right? Knife only mandates that you do B3 before 4th floor of the hospital. But let's say you're running any percent or nemesis percent and you wanted to do the basement of the hospital first. You can click this option here, and that'll switch the order so that it'll split going to the basement first. I've set it up so in order to use this option, you also have to use the major RNG segment above it. And then lastly, nemesis percent you do early crank, but let's say you wanted to do any percent and early crank as well. Well, you can check this option. And you can use these in any kind of mix and match that you want. The only one that requires another one is if you're going to use Hospital B3 before 4F, you have to use the one above it. Otherwise, you can use just the resets and early crank if you like. Right? Okay. If you already have a set of splits that you're using, the any percent splits up here, these are the ones that end in fin, as you can see right here. So that'll line up perfectly with that. So if you're already using those splits, that's all you need to do, is just make sure just this option is checked. Right? If you're using the splits that end with over here, then uncheck this option and check these two. Well, mostly this one, but you have to check this in order to get to the second one. If you use this, it'll split along with the over here splits. It'll go along perfectly with that. Right? Some other options that are available here is the basic door splits. So this will disable everything above, so you don't have to worry about those. But what basic door splits do is they just split on every single door. Every door transition you go through. There's a couple exceptions, but I won't really worry about those. But it'll split on every single door. Actually, I guess I should say the exceptions are if you go back and forth several times through the middle of the train, the dining piano room as Carlos, or the elevator in the dead factory next to the door leading to Acid Nemi. If you don't ride the elevator and just go in and out of it, it won't split more than once. But you probably won't do that anyway. Anyway, so those are the exceptions. Right. And now next we have the key item splits. So I did actually include a set of key item splits in this zip file here, which has splits for all of the any percent splits, or all of the key items you would pick up in an any percent run. Though I think I did leave off the grenade launcher, but you can just add that back in particular if you're running, Chinese or Taiwanese version with the GL tool. You can just add that in. But yeah, so you can just click here which items you want to split on. And all of these item splits work with any of the door split options up here as well. You would just have to add in splits for those items in the appropriate spot. Right? So in addition to these key items, these items are based off of the any percent run. If you wanted to, say, split on some of the extra items you get in Nemesis percent, or you just wanted to split on other things, you could also split on any of these other items. Shotgun, Magnum, Eagle parts, all three of the clock puzzle jewels if you really wanted. Okay. And the last feature here, it's kind of a lot in this, but if you really want to customize the splits as much as possible, I've set it up where you can fully customize which splits that it'll split on. So maybe you only wanted to split on sort of significant doors, right? So you can check or uncheck which doors you would like to split on here. There's 245 of them, so I'm not going through every single one, but I'll point out a couple things. By default, all of the ones that are checked here are the standard any percent route matching up with the fin splits. So the same as this any percent option up here, right? The names here, this is the room that they split on when you leave it, when you go from this room to the next room on the list, basically. Some of the rooms here, I've kind of denoted like what category they could be useful for. So like the Burning Alley save room, you would go in there that for Nemesis percent. Same thing, going from the restaurant straight to the shopping alley, that would again be Nemesis percent. I've also denoted the door transitions you would use for early crank, right? So here is when we stop earlier to pick up the crank. I've denoted that with early crank, and then you can see the additional options here. I also denote the ones that are used for late crank, just to kind of make it clear, since the names duplicate themselves. But yeah, so as long as you just kind of go in order here, they'll always split in this order going down the list here. So like you can't have it split at, let's say, the worm encounter, but then go back to Compass Alley or something, right? You always have to keep going down to progress, right? The other one I guess I should point out here is the hospital. If you, I've set up both, both options here for basement or fourth floor first. But it's of course kind of a little complicated, right? So be careful to look at the things in parentheses here, whether it says fourth floor first or B3 first. Those are going to determine which ones you want to check. These three in the middle, these work for both orders of the hospital. So it's all kind of determined on like, is B3 the first thing or the last thing that happens? So just keep an eye on those. Right? But yeah, so it's a little bit of a complicated feature until you kind of get used to it, but I figured I had the option to include this, and if anyone really wanted to really customize their own splits, that was an option there. But you can pretty much completely ignore this if you would like and just stick with the earlier options. Again, worth pointing out that this works with every version of the game. So, for example here, if I open up here the Rebirth version, which, by the way, I want to point out, the Rebirth version has to be named, just like this, Biohazard R3 PC, right? But if you open that up, notice here it detects it automatically, game version Rebirth, right? Whereas if I were to say open up the Chinese version here, if I were to open that up, it automatically detects that it's the Chinese Taiwanese version, right? So you don't have to worry about anything like that. Just just run the game however you want to. Don't have to worry about any version nonsense. And it'll work perfectly fine. Again, just to point out, you do still have to do the final split manually. Eventually, I'd like to fix that, but it's an elusive problem. And that was loud. But yeah, so hopefully the features in this are helpful and useful. And if you have any suggestions on anything, let me know.